Okay, thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. In doing this scene yesterday, I was just kind of fiddling around with a lot of different media, and it's multimedia, and it's a lot of media that I haven't used very much of, you know, at all, and especially in combination, so I don't have any kind of technique to kind of fall back on, so it's a lot of exploration, and kind of in doing so, I thought I was kind of done with the scene yesterday, or as far as I was going to take it, but I really wanted to add some extra shadows in the scene, because the foreground and this area in between these foreground and background trees just was not, it wasn't dark enough for the amount of light coming through there. I needed to create some deeper shadows from that light, so basically I just used a black colored pencil. I used a dark green one as well, and I just darkened in some of the trees here in the foreground, and I laid a lot of tone down on these trunks right in here, except for their edges where the light is coming through. And in the last little tweak of this scene, I added those two little figures in the background. I didn't want to add them down here because that would make these trees in relation to these characters enormous, and that's just not those types of trees right there. So I had to put them in the background, and I just kind of obscured them. You know, the whole idea is that it's getting dark, lighter, and then it would be lighter in the distance. So, you know, it's darker in the foreground, lighter in the distance, so I just really kind of obscured them with a lot of pigment ink, and there wasn't a whole lot of room for them, so they were just kind of peeking out from behind the trees, kind of in a little peekaboo type of fashion. And I think that finished the scene off a little bit better. And also in this video I added some workable fixative to the scene. You can see how many times I tested this out. I was trying to figure out how dark I wanted to make the impression back there, but anyways, I think that did the trick in terms of kind of finishing this scene off a little bit more than it was as far as the lighting goes, especially. And then those little figures kind of, you know, in terms of I don't know, a theme or whatever of the scene, I don't know, it added a focal point. There was just a lot of monotony in terms of the forms within here, and just adding those little figures in here. Everything's going vertical in here, but then what you do is you add kind of I guess they're visual anchor points. I mean, they're not so obscure that, you know, you're not going to see them, but I don't know, I thought those were a good way to kind of add on kind of a horizontal type of thing to contrast against, you know, the format of you know, the vast majority of this composition. So anyway, just little tweaks, which is sometimes what our scenes need more than kind of, you know, huge kind of corrections or whatnot. If you just add a little bit more, you can kind of finish off a scene and resolve some of the types of issues in it that would keep it from kind of achieving its kind of ultimate, I don't know, state of being, its resolution, whatever. But I don't know, those little things in the background are kind of fun for me, so thematically I don't know, it finished off the piece really nicely. And of course, I don't know, I could format this card in terms of matting and stuff like that and put some kind of quote stamp in here too, but I don't think I'm going to do that. But anyway, little tweaks on this scene. If you choose to watch it, I hope you enjoy it. Basically, all it is me adding in a lot of colored pencil. So, thanks again for watching, tuning into the channel. Okay, here is the scene again, and I'm going to add a few extra little touches to this. I was looking at it, and one of the things about this is it wasn't dark enough in some of these areas here, so I thought I would like to just go in and add a little bit more shading. I'm just going to stick with the media that I was using before in the form of some colored pencils, and in this case it's just using a black one, but I wanted to create a little bit more of a separation between the foreground and the background. The background in this case happens to be a very shallow kind of field of view, and I thought it would be good to just kind of, I don't know, tweak this a little bit. I was looking at it in some photographs that I took, and I thought, we could use a little bit more contrast, so let's see what we can do here. I like what this colored pencil edition. I mean, there's a lot of control over it, of course, being just a pencil, and, we're all comfortable with kind of changing the pressure that we can use on it. And as far as my use of the pencil, I'm just using it in a very light touch. But here's what it is. I wanted to go... I like the textures on these trees, but I want them to just be a little bit more in the shadows, okay, of this scene. So I thought, I could use a little bit more. But one of the things I'm going to do too, and you really don't know what it's going to look like until you do it, but I want to spray seal this. And I'm not really quite sure what it'll do with the VersaFine ink that was used on these foreground trees. But I don't know, we'll find out. Okay, so I'm just kind of adding, I don't know, it's a pretty decent tint or shade on these trees, the foreground. I still get the benefit of the layering of all the colors in here, so I can still see all the colors. They're just kind of a little bit more below the surface, I guess you can say. Now, this is what I'm doing right here. It's basically, it's probably about that value of black that I'm doing. Okay, something like that. It might be applying a little bit less over the surface of this, kind of a, I don't know, somewhat sealed surface of the, that the alcohol inks. But I can see it. It's getting, it's applying very well over the top here, so I don't think that's really any problem. I wanted to do this because I really like this scene here, and I really liked the media and kind of the process and how it felt to do this scene just in pens and gel pens, and just the layering of the alcohol inks was really fun. But I don't know, as far as the scene goes, it could really use a little bit more kind of a polish to it, in terms of kind of the end result. Alright, now I'm laying this down over some of the pigment ink, and I can feel the pigment ink kind of rubbing off, so... But that's alright. I mean, if I do feel like adding some more, I can always do that. And one of the things I think I mentioned in this video, but... or somewhere else, like in the last day or two, but I'm thinking about laying down a layer of workable fixative over the top of this, and that'll seal off what we have down there, so then I can kind of go in over it again. And colored pencil is one of those things that, kind of workable fixatives are, perfect for, in terms of sealing something off and adding additional layers. That's what they mean by workable. You can still work on it. It's not sealing it off to where, the media isn't going to stick to it anymore. But yeah, this is just, I don't know, it's been a while since I've worked in colored pencil, or, just exclusively with some pens or something like that. It's kind of a different spirit, too. I have to kind of get a little bit used to it, because, there's kind of a different, yeah, I don't know, not view, but approach, you know, when you're using larger sponges, and it's kind of harder to get into, you know, some really detailed areas with that. Although I love detail a lot, but it's kind of nice. It's just like adding down like little shades like that. And you can do this with other colors too, of course. So just adding some tone down like that. This area in here was okay, but it needed a little bit more. Let's see. Let me try this dark green again. I'll go and add that. It's subtle, okay? Especially when the background is fairly dark already. And you're just adding this in. I just see this kind of light shade, or a light application, I guess, of a certain color being laid in there. Yeah, it's kind of coming around. The thing that, again, the thing that kind of surprises me about this is just how well these different, this different media can apply to its, I don't know, I mean, I'm laying this over some of the alcohol inks, and those of us that have used alcohol inks, you know how it gets. You know, it gets really kind of sealed off, and I don't know, it's like kind of like a waxy type of surface on top of it. But I don't know. I guess it's the paper that's allowing us to do it. It has enough too that I wouldn't call this a textured paper by any means, but there's just enough texture to it that the pencils and inks and everything like that just lay down just really nicely. Going in here and adding some deeper shadows here. I might be doing a lot of these techniques all wrong too, you know, those with those that are really accustomed to working with colored pencils and whatnot might cringe at this, but it's fun. So I guess anytime it's fun, that's the right technique. Is how I rationalize it. Okay. Yeah, it looks a little bit better. It feels different, you know, with all that additional layering in there, too. Alright. That being done there, let's go even darker on here. I kind of brought the background a little bit darker, so let's adjust here again too and add down a little bit of an extra value maybe of the trees, foreground tree trunks. Okay, that's a little bit, it's a little bit better. Did it just look more dimensional to you? One of the things I like to do with my dye-based inks when I'm doing this is I like to create a stronger base, and if the background is, you know, has so much light kind of pouring through, one of the things that I needed to do is I needed to create kind of some shadows coming from my objects, like these trees here, so it just wasn't dark enough. It kind of, the shadows didn't represent the lighting. There was enough lighting in there, but with lighting like that, strong lighting should come shadows, and that just didn't exist. So that's where this kind of additional treatment comes into play. Whenever I'm kind of playing around with something and I'm learning it, naturally there's a kind of a more kind of calculated kind of a application of that media, but then I kind of get into it a little bit more and I go a little bit faster and kind of know what I'm doing a little bit more, or at least what I'm going after. Alright, that looks quite a bit better, I think. There's shadows being created here. I have a little bit of light here, but kind of anchoring down those trees, and same thing down here. This foreground was, it was much too light before. And I think that is a little bit better. It was worth the effort to put in that extra little touch in there. I have fingerprints on here. I think my VersaFine ink is a little bit wet. I have my fingerprint here. I see it on my fingers still. So anyway, this is a matte, coated matte paper, and this was allowed to dry overnight, but a little bit wet still. That surprises me. I mean, I could heat set it, so it's not a problem using it. I would use it again still, but keep that in mind. I'm just going over this and laying down a little bit of pigment ink here. Getting rid of some of my smudgy marks. I'm using this one's the Hero Arts Unicorn. I think the Unicorn line is the name of the entire line of their pigment inks. There's Unicorn this and Unicorn that. The white one is just straight Unicorn. Alright, enhancing a little bit more some of the light that's kind of pouring through the background into the scene. Okay, as I mentioned in the main video for this scene, the ink tends to dry darker, okay? The white, I don't know, the white doesn't necessarily become darker, but it just becomes less translucent, so whatever you have behind or underneath the pigment ink becomes more apparent, you know, as this dries out. I'll let a little bit of this down here on the forest floor. There's a little bit less lighting down here now. After all that black colored pencil. Okay. I think I'm going to try something. Alright, I have this pad here. Cool Perry. I haven't used this before. This is one of those Adirondack pigment inks that are discontinued now, but someone asked me if I could use it because they didn't want it, or they didn't have a use for it, but I made a trade for it. Yeah, I completely forgot about the Adirondack Lights pigment inks, but it wasn't too little too late because there's still a little bit of inventory of it out there. I haven't used it. This is the first time I've used it, but I don't know. I thought I could have a an application or two for it, just in terms of just getting a little bit of hue into some areas that I would normally just utilize white with. I thought it could give me kind of a subtle variation to my applications when it comes to usages like this. Okay. All right, now I'm just adding that down here. That it's what this probably ends up looking like in the end result is probably more of a like a gray-ish tone. I don't, if anyone can make out the kind of the temperature, the slight cool temperature of this Cool Perry, I wouldn't know. I would doubt it, but I don't know. I think it's worth using. It's just it's more subtle. If not anything else than the white, and I don't know. For me, it gives me just some choices, I guess. All right. Now I eradicated a lot of my little kind of base of the trees, little blossoms by just going over everything with that black Prismacolor. So I'm going back in here and just adding these back in. I'm not worried about adding them where I added them before, but I don't know, the scene has changed, so where I would add these now might be different than where I added them before. Okay, there we go. Let's see, something like that. What those are, it could represent flowers. In the end, it's really just texture. It kind of brings areas to life a little bit, even though it's reasonably rich down there in terms of textures. But when you add in things like that, I don't know, it just adds one extra texture and layer in a given area, and I don't know, it does create quite a contrast when you're using white dots somewhere in a field of otherwise darker values. And plus, if you retain some of the whiteness in other areas, what you can do is you can kind of create a continuity with those other areas, and that's what we want. We want kind of a continuity throughout our scenes. We want separation in terms of visuals, but we can create a continuity between those visuals with things like texture, color, anything, pattern. Alright, I'm using this like a little whiteout pen in those areas. Alright, let's see what this looks like. Sprayed, okay? Let me see. I need to do this. I'll create a little mark here so I know where to put my paper. Alright, this is before. We'll see if there's any kind of after. Let me zoom in a little bit. Like that. Okay, I'm back, and I think it became darker, but I'm not sure. I hit it with a workable fixative, and I don't know, as far as I could tell, you know, right immediately when I sprayed it, I thought that some of the tones in here became darker, so I would usually know what that would indicate, you know, in terms of losing some of the pigment ink applications. I know that gets darker for sure. And when I hit layered dye bastings, I know those become darker too. I'm not sure what happens with things like colored pencils, or I'm guessing with the alcohol ink applications it would also become darker, just because they're transparent as well. But I don't know. It seemed like it initially became darker, but I'm not sure how it looked when it kind of set up, if it retained that. So I hit it with a workable fixative, but my spray can wasn't working real well, so it's kind of splattering. So I tried not to hit it too hard, you know, or too thick, you know, with too thick of a saturation of it. I'm testing right now for dampness. Okay, my VersaFine down here is still a little bit moist, so I don't know, I could let that air dry, or I could hit it with a heat gun if I want to, just to expedite the process, but I don't know if I need to do that, so I'm not sure what I want to do now on this. Let me see something. Let me see that workable fixative. I'm taking it. I'm guessing that, you know, it's not going to be, yeah. The colored pencils just goes right over the spray fixative. I'm not sure how it would go over like a Krylon Crystal Clear or something like that. Something that's more sealed and really smooth. But the workable fixative accepts additional colored pencil for sure. I'm sure if you're doing things like chalks or something like that. I wouldn't lay chalks over Prismacolors, but if you just did something like chalks or pastels on a scene like this, you could use a workable fixative and add additional layers of it. I'm saying you can't use like charcoal usually, or like pastels or chalks over, you know, colored pencil, because these are like wax, you know, in terms of what you're building up. So I'm guessing something like that would kind of resist it. Maybe oil pastels would work just fine. But anyway, okay, so those are my little tweaks on this scene. It just had to become a little bit darker in some areas to kind of achieve what I wanted it to, in terms of kind of tweaking my lighting within the scene. So a little bit more shadows, or I don't know, maybe it was a lot more. And happy to report that after doing that, after adding that and adding some workable spray fixative, you can add more, as much as you want, right over the top, without any problems at all. So, yeah, that seemed to do the trick. And with, you know, something like colored pencils, there's quite a bit of control over that type of application of the media, or of the tone, I guess, you know, because of the media. So, alright, a little bit more defined, I guess, in here in terms of lighting, a little bit more obscure in terms of maybe some details on the forest floor, but you know, it looks better to me in terms of you know, the overall lighting within the scene. So I don't know, it's a fun technique, I would say. I've probably worked this one to death, though, in terms of the process, but I really like that light, you know, coming through in the scene, and how that looks, and how you're able to kind of control it with this particular grouping of multimedia choices here. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Little tweaks here and there on this scene. I felt it was worth it to go back in and to add these in, because I really like the scene, but you know, when you're kind of experimenting around, you really don't know where to take things at time, and I thought I would investigate. So okay, I can't stop working on this one, apparently, but I think I'm done. Okay, thanks for watching. Okay, apparently I can work on this scene forever, because I seem to be just keep seeing things that I want to do, but the scene is kind of missing a focal point, don't you think? I mean, it's fine in terms of a statement, but in terms of like a, I don't know, kind of a finished piece, I thought, you know, it can really use something. I'm thinking about this buck in here, but I can't have it down here because these are not like, you know, sequoias or something like that, these gigantic trees, so I need to have it up here. Higher up in a composition means farther back in the distance, but let's put it in some light. I have a lot of pigment ink here. I was thinking about the VersaFine, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I want this elk to be really kind of far back in the distance there, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just mask off a tree. Okay, something like that. Now, alright, I need to break out my scissors. How many times do I do this? Hardly ever. But in this case, I think that'll be worth it to take that like 2 or 3 seconds to cut my mask off for that tree. And I'm going to try to stamp this character right back in there, okay? I kind of want it coming through there, and it's going to be kind of in a, I don't know, this veil of mist in the end result. So I'm going to hit it down there with, I don't know, kind of like a stamped off black, okay? So my second impression will be much lighter. Okay, there. Yeah, something like that. And I'll be stamping it over some pigment ink that's already laid down there, so I'm going to be careful about that. Alright, this is what I'm going to do too. I'm going to wipe off the feet and this shadow area down here, which is needed in some instances, but in this case I'm going to have it kind of in some fog, so I want to obscure the legs quite a bit. And alright, here goes nothing. Alright, deer behind a tree. It's a little in front of the tree a little bit, but I'll just kind of obscure that a touch. It's kind of like definitely a peekaboo application of that animal. All right. So let's define this tree a little bit, where it puts it behind it. Okay. So there we have that. And let's go like this. Oops. I guess I undermasked too much. Alright. One of the benefits of colored pencil. You just go like that. And what I'll do is I'll mask that off right there. Okay. And let's hit it with a little bit of pigment ink, and we'll push our character back in the distance a touch. Just putting in some pigment ink, okay, from kind of a dry pad of some color box frost white. Oops, this is the one that had blue on it. Here, I'll use the other side. Okay. His hindquarters are sticking out like that a little bit. That's kind of fun, and it makes me think about this other thing. I could put another one, like in the distance or something like that. So we have this kind of like a hide and go seek kind of application of these characters within the scene. Alright, there's one. Okay. That horn up there is a little bit wet, so I'm not going to go over it. But let me grab this other dough stamp and see if there's any place that I can put it. Okay, here's my little dough. And I'm trying to find a spot that I could put it, just like a little tiny thing, like a head or something's poking out from around the corner. The only place I can see is kind of right in between this tree, or these two trunks. So it'd be something like this. Okay, let me see if I can get that in there. Here, I'll just use this, like so. Okay. Alright, I'm going to go for it. Alright, I usually undermask, but I think I undermasked by too much on that buck there. Alright, I'm going to blot off once, and it's just going to be a head. Okay, alright. There we go. Alright. Maybe I didn't undermask enough, but we have our colored pencil. And all we have to do is just go in there and fill in. What an easy save. Alright. Okay. Kind of air drying that a little bit. And going in, we'll take some pigment ink again. Oops, that's my really wet color box pigment ink. Let me go for my quite a bit drier one. Okay, just kind of adding that in, obscuring the, I should have wiped it off on the feet a little bit more, but you can always go in with the pigment ink and kind of knock it back a little bit. Okay, let's see what our characters look like. I don't know, I wouldn't call them a visual anchor, but it's definitely, well, it's more of a hide-and-go-seek thing, you know, than anything very apparent, to say the least. First of all, the two things are like hiding behind trees, or at least visually. Alright, let me see if I can kind of go in, and if they're farther back, then they're going to be lighter than the trees in front of them, but I don't want to make them so obscure that you can't even see them. They're almost like ghosts. Alright, now if they're kind of obscure like that, then I have to put a little bit in my foreground to kind of, match it. I mean, there are, you know, there's quite a bit of this pigment going on everywhere, but I'll just make it a little bit stronger, kind of to match that intensity. Okay, building this up. Ooh, that's way too much ink. This isn't my most graceful application of media. It's really worked and worked and worked. I have so many layers on here. Just because it's, you know, the first time I've used kind of this media in this combination especially. But sometimes you can get some really fun results. It's when you have to really kind of work something sometime. You know, when you kind of start the foundation of some sort of technique. So, yeah, I wouldn't even call this a technique, but kind of more of an experiment here. But I don't know, I think those characters look pretty decent in there. Now that pigment ink is going to dry a little bit darker and more translucent, or I don't know, closer to transparent, I think. So I'm just going to let that dry. And I think this is done. I don't think I will need to add any more. Yeah, every time it dries down here, that foot comes out much stronger. But those characters in there add a little something. I don't know. What do you think? In terms of thematically, or is it? I don't know. I don't know if it's thematically, but you know, in terms of kind of just an overall type of end result. Peekaboo would be a good name for this one, or I don't know, it's like a Find Wally type of thing. But anyway, okay, that was fun stuff. I think I'm going to stop working on it right now, and I think I'm done.